Good afternoon, Chair. Your meeting is now live.
Okay, thank you very much indeed, Peter. Welcome, members. I've got a script which I'll read through first of all, which hopefully will help people that aren't familiar with either SMP or virtual meetings. I imagine most of us should be conversant with virtual meetings by now. This is actually the first one I've chaired, so bear with me as well while I go through this. And I believe everyone's here, so we'll start formally. This is my script. So good afternoon, everyone. I'm Councillor Jason Pazzackley, chair of this panel. I'd like to welcome you to this virtual meeting that's being broadcast to enable the press and public to view it. We are meeting virtually in response to the limitations placed on governance by the COVID-19 pandemic. The City Solicitor has advised that this meeting will be run by reference to the model standing orders set out in the local authorities coronavirus flexibility of local authority meetings, regulations 2020 number 392. Hope you will remember that. Please can members and officers turn their microphones off when not speaking to avoid potential feedback. I'll first begin by asking each committee member to introduce themselves, and I'll call each of you. So first of all, Councillor Madden.
Councillor Leo Madden, present.
Thank you. Councillor Simon Bosher.
Councillor Simon Bosher, present, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Ben Dowling.
Ben Dowling, present, Chair.
Councillor George Fielding.
Councillor George Fielding, present, Lord Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. I know we've already had issues in regards to Councillor Joe Hooper, so she'll be joining us in due course. Councillor Peter Harris.
Present and correct, Lord Mayor.
Okay, Councillor Fuller, who's deputising for Councillor Purvis.
Good afternoon, Chair. Good afternoon, members. Councillor David Fuller, present.
And last but not least, Councillor Linda Symes.
Councillor Linda Symes, present.
Thank you. So that's all members, with the exception of Councillor Hooper, who will join us later. Oh. Okay, members, put your phones onto mute or silent. Can I now ask each of the officers to introduce themselves? Councillor, Councillor, giving you a title there, Peter. Peter Balfe.
Peter Balfe, City Solicitor. Good afternoon, everybody.
Thank you. Natasha Edmonds.
Good afternoon, Natasha Edmonds, Director of Corporate Services. Thanks.
Thank you. Pam Turton.
Good afternoon, I'm Pam Turton. I'm the Assistant Director for Transport within the Regeneration Directorate.
Okay. Hayley Trower.
Hi, I'm Hayley Trower. I'm the Air Quality Lead for Transport.
Thank you. And Vicky Pleitas.
Vicky Pleitas, present, Chair, Democratic Services.
Okay, thank you. There are some other members on this online, i.e. Councillor Ashmore, are watching, but that's the official roll call for the meeting. The agenda will begin. First, apologies for absence. I've received an apology for absence from Councillor Will Purvis, and Councillor David Fuller will deputise for him. Next is declaration of members' interests. Members, are there any interests from any of you? Okay.
Chair, it's not really an interest. I mean, I'm going to have to leave the meeting at 10 to 3 because my wife has a maternity scan that I have to attend. But I'm sure you can let me go on that account.
Sure. Okay, no problem. Good luck. Okay, no one else has declared any interests. Can I then turn to the minutes of the meeting held on the 31st of January 2020? We should all have copies of those. Can I ask members, are the minutes agreed? No, it needs to be somebody who was actually present at the meeting.
Agreed, Chairman.
Yeah, I second that, Chair.
Okay, no disagreements? Fine, okay, minutes are agreed. We now move to deputations. There are no deputations from members of the public, but there has been a deputation request received from Councillor Judith Smythe in regards to item 4. Okay, so I will ask Judith to give her deputation once I formally start that particular item, which actually is now. We now have the call in of the decision taken by Cabinet on the 6th of October 2020 in respect of item 8 on the agenda, Clean Air Zone consultation feedback. Members, we're here today as 5 members of the council: Councillor Cal Corkery, Jeanette Smith, Claire Udy, Graham Heaney and Tom Coles have asked for the decision taken by the Cabinet on the 6th of October 2020 on the clean air consultation zone feedback to be called in for scrutiny on the basis that they believe the decision may have been taken based on inaccurate, incorrect or inadequate information. If the panel is satisfied that the decision has not been based on inaccurate or incorrect information, or that it was not taken without adequate information being supplied to enable the Cabinet to reach its decision, then no further action is required and the matter ends here. If the panel is not satisfied on these grounds, that the panel may refer the matter back to the Cabinet for reconsideration, setting out in writing the nature of its concerns that are to be addressed in conjunction with the original matter. Officers who have detailed knowledge of the clean air zone, Hayley Trower and Pam Turton, are in attendance today in case the panel has any queries. The procedure we will follow is set out in Appendix 2, previously circulated. And I'll just read this through this before we actually start. Number 1, written deputations. Well, there are none, but there is a deputation from Councillor Smythe. 2 will be presentation of the call-in by the lead call-in member, which is Councillor Corkery. Cal, I'll give you time. You get 6 minutes to present the reasons and the grounds for the call-in. At the end of that presentation, if any members of the panel have any questions, they may ask so. Following that, there will be a response from the lead cabinet member. And can I ask Councillor Gerald Vernon Jackson at that point to present his response? And again, as in the first instance, at the end of the response, any panel questions can be put forward. Then there'll be a further response only made by the lead call-in member. So Cal, you can take any follow-up from any points you wish to raise from that. And also there will then be a lead call-in member to sum up your case. It then switches to the lead cabinet member to sum up his case, at which we will have a general debate amongst scrutiny management panel members, followed by a decision. And again, I'll ask anybody who wishes to speak during the debate. Either raise the hand on the computer or just call out to me. I'm not the most IT literate, but I'll do my best to follow it. Okay, so that's the procedure. We'll then need to see whether a vote needs to be taken at the end or not. Has anybody got any questions on the way that's going to pan out? Are you happy with the procedure for that? Okay, well, there's no dissent. So we'll start by asking Councillor Smythe, would you like to give your deputation?
Chairman, if I just can, Councillor Hooper has finally managed to join us.
Good morning. Sorry, I've had a problem. Sorry, good afternoon. I've had a problem with my internet, but obviously I'm sorted now. Sorry for being late.
Cool, at least you're here. We've only literally just gone through the agenda procedure. So switching back to that, can I ask Councillor Smythe if you'd like to give your deputation? Can I just check how long does a member get for a deputation?
6 minutes, Chair.
Yeah, okay, just to confirm. So you have up to 6 minutes, Judith. If you're there, which I actually don't see you on the list. Right. Vicky, if you can confirm, looking at the list of people present at the meeting, I can't see Councillor Smythe amongst them.
No, I can't see Councillor Smythe either. There's something in chat though. Hang on.
I can't see anything from Councillor Smythe on the chat.
No, I can't. No, I can't see anything.
Can I just confirm she was aware and sent notification of the meeting and the time?
She was. I sent her it this morning.
Well, I can't really hold the meeting up.
Chair, I had my hand up there. Can I ask a question?
Yes, sure.
Did Councillor Smythe actually submit a written deputation? That's perhaps why she's not here.
If I can answer that, Councillor Madden, she didn't submit a written deputation. She was going to attend today, and I sent her the link this morning.
Right. Okay. Well, I won't be too draconian here, but if she's not here and we've got the whole meeting ahead of us, I can't really hold the meeting up. So, with no disrespect to Councillor Smythe, as she's not actually here on time, we've got no reason for her not being here. I think I'm going to have to proceed, basically, and unfortunately, we're not going to get her deputation. If I can then move on, it'll be the presentation of the call-in. So this is down to you, Cal. You have 6 minutes, sorry, Councillor Corkery, to present the reasons and the grounds for why this was called in. And at the end of your presentation, as I previously said, if any of the panel have got any questions, then feel free to raise them then. But please allow Councillor Corkery to speak without interruptions. Councillor Corkery, across to you, up to 6 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm Cal Corkery, Ward Councillor for Charles Dickens and member of the Labour Group. I'm speaking to you today on behalf of the Labour and Progressive Portsmouth People Group councillors who've worked together to call in this decision. Air quality and climate crisis are some of the biggest issues facing our city, and we are proud to work collaboratively towards encouraging the administration to take the radical steps needed to bring about change. We're seriously concerned that the decision to remove some of the most heavily polluted roads in the city from the planned clean air zone is going to increase pollution on those routes and risks creating a dirty air corridor from the Rusmore roundabout junction through North End and Fratton into Southsea. There is an obvious and undisputed link between air pollution and poor health outcomes. We know that in the ward I represent, Charles Dickens, there is already high levels of respiratory illness, which is often caused or at least worsened by exposure to dangerous levels of pollution. That is despite those living in the ward having by far the lowest rate of car ownership in the city. In short, we are paying the price for a crisis not of our making, a clear class and environmental injustice. Risk of severe illness. It has never been more important to ensure we're doing all we can to ensure clean and healthy communities. We believe that the Cabinet took this decision on the basis of inaccurate and inadequate information, as we'll outline shortly, and we would strongly encourage you to use the powers at your disposal to refer this matter back to Cabinet for proper consideration in light of the necessary information. To begin with, we believe that there's 2 points on which the decision has been based on inaccurate or incorrect information. The first, and arguably most significant, is the integrated impact assessment that included the information required as part of the Equalities Impact Assessment. This assessment seems to attempt to address questions of whether a clean air zone should be implemented or not. However, the actual decision being made was whether to amend the previously agreed boundaries of the proposed clean air zone. This meant that the impact assessment focused primarily on the positive benefits of introducing a clean air zone and did not address any potential negative impacts of reducing the size of that zone. This is notably significant in relation to Fratton Road, where there is a concentration of businesses worked in and frequented by ethnic minorities. There is growing evidence of linkages between serious illness, risk of serious illness from COVID-19, air pollution, and disproportionate impacts on minority communities. This is an important topic that should have been addressed as part of the Equalities Impact Assessment relating to this decision, but did not feature anywhere in it. Second, the Cabinet members at the meeting repeatedly noted the decision, the boundary, with the implication that the decision was out of their hands in that it was being dictated by what government had said and required. Whereas in reality, the government had already approved the previous boundaries for the zone, and there was no indication or evidence to suggest that they would no longer support that size of zone. In terms of inadequate information, or the decision being taken without adequate information, we've got 5 further points to support that argument. The first is that the report did not refer to the potential benefits of a clean air zone for those who work, live and learn in the Fratton Road and Kingston Road area. And we believe that is a key piece of information that should have been considered as part of this decision, but wasn't. Second, the report did not explore the particular makeup of those communities and the potential implications of those social classifications. For example, we know there is a significantly higher incidence of social deprivation and respiratory illnesses in the areas around Fratton Road and Kingston Road. What are the implications of this for reducing the size of the clean air zone? Again, not touched on the report and not discussed at the meeting. Third, the report did not refer to the relevant evidence regarding illegal levels of pollution in the areas in question. For example, the assessment of air quality Annual Statement Report 2020 presented to the Cabinet Portfolio Decision Meeting for Environment and Climate Change on the 23rd of July of this year made specific reference to dangerous and illegal levels of air pollution on Fratton Road. However, this information was not presented or considered by the Cabinet as part of the decision. Fourth, the report did not detail the public health risks of exposure to nitrogen dioxide. How can decision makers be expected to come to an informed position about reducing the size of a clean air zone without reference to the potential negative impacts on public health? Fifth, during their deliberations, decision makers repeatedly made reference to the economic case for reducing the size of a clean air zone. However, it was unclear what the evidence base was for this suggestion. There is no reference to the economic case within the published reports. In conclusion, we have identified a number of ways in which this decision was either based on inaccurate information or was taken without consideration of adequate information. Of perhaps most significance is the inadequate equalities impact assessment, which in fact appears to relate to a different previous decision, that of whether to implement a clean air zone or not, as opposed to the decision recently taken by Cabinet and being considered for us today, that of whether the boundaries of the planned clean air zone should be revised. This distinction makes a material and substantial difference to the way in which the impacts on groups protected by the 2010 Equalities Act is measured. That alone should be justification enough to refer this decision back to Cabinet for reconsideration in light of a proper equalities impact assessment for the action being considered. In addition, we have highlighted how a range of other pertinent information has either been misrepresented or missed out altogether. When making decisions of this significance, it is essential that those decisions are based on the correct and full information available. We believe it is clear that this has not happened in this case. Although it is noted that the scrutiny meeting must focus on the technicalities of information considered as part of the decision-making process, it is important to also reflect on the wider political and social implications. The Fratton Road, Kingston Road corridor runs through some of the most deprived and unhealthiest communities in our city. Despite those communities often not being the cause of pollution, they are still subjected to appallingly poor levels of air quality and pollution, the impact of which on the ability to live healthy and happy lives is undeniable. Thank you for listening to our presentation, and we hope you fully consider the points we have made when making your decision. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Carol, for that. Members, we now move to the point where this includes obviously Carol himself. If you have any questions in regards to the report, either through what's been raised by Councillor Corkery during his 6-minute chat there, or that you've got prior to the meeting, then feel free to ask. We have a range of officers on board that basically respond to any of those questions, and obviously I'll seek to assist where I can do. Again, can I ask, if you wish to speak, can you use the raised hand function? I'll do my best to follow it. If for any reason I seem to have missed you, then shout out and I'll come back to you. So first of all, I see Councillor Madden was the first to raise his hand, and Councillor Bosher. Now we have, I noticed Councillor Smythe has now appeared and originally raised her hand. Can I just ask for clarification, can we take questions from councillors who aren't members of the panel?
No.
Peter or Vicky, can you advise?
My understanding, Chair, is that you can't take questions from people who are not on the panel because it's the panel's decision.
Exactly.
Okay, fine. So, Councillor Smythe, if you're still there, unfortunately you were too late for us to hear your deputation. I had to move on, and as you've heard from that, I'm afraid I can't take any questions from you. Nothing personal, but that's procedure. If we can go back.
Sorry, Chair, can we just get a ruling from Peter Bolt about whether Councillor Smythe can make a deputation at this point in the meeting, please?
Okay.
I don't have a problem with the deputation, but I do have a problem with the fact of dealing with questions, having not heard matters. So I agree with Vicky on that.
Okay, so basically you're saying it's okay to take the deputation now.
Yeah, I don't have a real problem with that at all, Councillor.
Okay. I'll be democratic. Any problems, members? Are we okay to take Judith's deputation now?
Sorry, Chair, but I do have actually an issue with that because you've actually started the agenda. The meeting's actually started. We've heard the submission from Councillor Corkery, and now we've potentially got a deputation that we have no idea of what Councillor Smythe is actually going to say. We have a structure for a reason, and I don't think we should differ from that.
I'll take your point, Scott. That was my understanding of it, but having had that advice from the officers, that conflicts with what we're saying. Peter, can you come back on that, please?
Well, I was going to say, if it's a deputation, you know, I suppose the idea of scrutiny in a sort of open and transparent basis is for all opinions of the members to be put to the scrutiny panel. Whilst I take the view that she can't ask questions about something she's not heard, I don't think a written readout of a deputation takes much away from the process. In fact, it informs you better to make a decision moving on. The argument being that it might have had some fundamental bearing upon the decision you ultimately make. That's my view about it.
Okay, so as our legal officer here, you'll make it clear to the meeting, you're saying there's no reason to stop Councillor Smythe giving a deputation, albeit it's later on now in the agenda than was originally.
You know, you've got to take a balanced view. Obviously, the learned member was going to attend and had IT issues or whatever, so striking her out for that is probably unreasonable. Taking a view on what she says in a sort of democratic and transparent way is a fair and proportionate thing to do. It doesn't detract from the process, and in fact, it enhances the process. My view is that, you know, in terms of any rules of natural justice, I think it would be appropriate that she's heard.
Okay.
Ultimately, Chairman, it's for the committee to do to decide whether to hear the deputation or not. I mean, Peter Bolf has given his advice, but really, I guess you need to take a vote as to whether we're going to actually hear it.
Yeah, you're right. You don't have to take it. Sorry, Simon, you don't have to take it.
No, it's down to Thank you for your interpretation and guidance.
Fine.
Hang on a second, Councillor Madden. Okay, so where we are now is, I think that probably I'll come to you in a second, Leo. My understanding of it now is that it's perfectly acceptable for us to do that if the panel is prepared to agree it amongst themselves. So I shall ask for a vote in a second. Before I ask for that vote, does anybody else have any questions or comments to make in regards to the issue of the late deputation?
I do.
Okay, what's your point?
Well, my point is that it's very early on in the meeting anyway. I mean, I think if Councillor Smythe had come along, or anybody else having said they want to do a deputation much later on the agenda, when we've heard from both Carl, who's doing the call in, and Gerald, who's leading it, I would not have agreed then that it should happen. So I have no problem with this at all. I mean, we've probably spent 6 minutes now actually discussing whether it's do it or not. So I will vote that Councillor Smythe is heard.
Okay, can I ask members, is there agreement that Councillor Smythe can give her deputation? All in favour, just do raise hand.
These hands, which hands?
Right, I can't see all of you on the screen. Okay, just do a quick raise on the side so I can see. Okay, any against giving her a deputation? That would appear to me that Councillor Smythe can give her deputation. Okay, so Councillor Smythe, can I pass across to you? You have up to 6 minutes, I believe, to give your deputation to the panel.
Thank you very much indeed, and I'm extremely sorry for being late. It's partly because it is entirely because I was transfixed by the fact there is apparently a vaccine now for COVID, and I was almost in tears at the news upstairs, and I apologise for being late. I'm really sorry. I don't have much to add to what Councillor Corkery has said. I think he has done a very thorough job with his statement. I just wanted to emphasise the importance of using evidence when making decisions. And I think that the evidence of inequalities and impact are extremely important in the case of omitting the Fratton Kingston Road area from the zone, especially when it was earlier on decided that that should be included. and that the reasons given were those of a lot of population, a lot of people walking around. Many more people walk around the streets of that part of the zone, the proposed zone, than walk up and down, for example, Alfred Street, which is very much, you're rare to see a pedestrian there. And I'm particularly concerned about young children and older people with lung problems, and I think we should have taken more evidence of that. The only thing I want to add to the statement made by Councillor Corkery is that I don't think the Cabinet used evidence of the air quality of clean air zones elsewhere. And very recently, there was some research done into the impact of clean air zones across wide parts of London, which showed that air quality had improved over considerable areas, and that the larger the clean air zone, the more impact it has. And I think that's another area of evidence that should have been taken into account and reported to the public when the Cabinet made their decision. And that's all I have to say. Thank you very much for listening.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Smythe, for that. I'll now go back to the agenda. We've had the introduction by Cal there. It's now open to members to speak, or ask questions rather. I had two people already that were down. First of all was Councillor Madden, then Councillor Bosher. Obviously, as I said before, raise your hands once you've spoken, then put your hand down. I can't do that from here. So, Councillor Madden, you were the first one. Over to you. Councillor Madden? Are you still there?
Yeah, but Leo's on mute.
I was just muting and unmuting. It does my head in. Can I just, I want to thank Cal for his speech on this. We had a written copy, of course, within the papers itself. There seems to be, and the thing is to do with the assessment that was done. There is a suggestion at the start of his deputation that a decision, it appeared to him, was being taken whether or not to implement a CAZ, or CAS, I call it. I don't know if that's what other people call it. But of course, that's not the case. And I just wonder if, when it goes down to members being out, the decision being out of members' hands, what they mean is that they have to do something. Whether it's tweaked or not, or changed quite a lot, is a different matter. But it's quite clear to all of us, isn't it, from the papers, that we have to implement a CAZ. I don't know whether I think that does CAS accept that there was a very wide consultation exercise and some very good responses from people, and it's on the back of that that people made decisions?
Okay, thank you. Again, just to clarify for myself as well as members of the panel, my understanding was that this was questions to officers. I'm not sure whether we had a question session for members to Cal on the points that he raised. But Vicky or Peter, can you give some clarity here? My understanding was it's questions from panel members to officers in regards to the report, but I may be wrong. Vicky or Peter?
That was my understanding of it, Councillor, yeah. It's questions to the relevant officers.
Yes, I think that's my understanding of it. So we're not sitting here to question Cal on his reasons for it.
Sure, it doesn't say that.
It doesn't say that per se, Councillor Madden, but I think, like me, you've been on the council for a long time, and that's normally the procedure for meetings such as this. It's questions for officers that you may have as a panel member in regards to the report and any concerns that you have or do not have. I don't think this is an opportunity for members to basically question the councillor who called the decision in. So that's my understanding. It would appear to be the understanding of the legal officer as well. So when I ask you, Councillor Madden, if you've got any questions, then direct those to.
I've no questions of officers because I wasn't prepared to question to officers, and I have to say that I think the procedure should be much more specific when we're doing this in future. I do recall asking questions at the last scrutiny panel that I attended of the person who called it in, which was Donna, and the person who replied it was Gerald.
So you're saying you asked questions to Councillor Jones because she called an issue?
That's my recollection, yes.
I wasn't there, so I don't know. Again, I can only ask, just for clarity again, want this to be an open meeting. My understanding was that it's questions to officers. Our legal advisor said the same thing. Now, unless there's any rabid opposition to that from amongst members of the panel, I suggest that's the way that we proceed. My apologies, Councillor Madden, but that's the way that
Councillor Pisackley, if I can, I mean, my questions were sort of going to be directed to officers anyway, but how could we legitimately direct questions to officers when we've only heard one side of the argument so far?
Fair point.
Chair, just to build on what Councillor Bosher was saying, I think I've just read through the procedure myself, and the way it's written certainly reads to me as if it's person A gives their perspective and we get to ask them questions, then person B gives their perspective, in this case the leader and Councillor Corkery, and we question their perspective, and then the officers are here to provide information should we require it from them. And having been through this procedure a few times, I certainly remember answering questions previously as part of this process. Yeah, I'm not going to die in a ditch on it one way or the other, and actually I think we probably can get through the majority of the information we want to by posing questions to officers and the cabinet member, but it would seem odd that we would hear one side of the story and then have a questions section without those questions being to the person who's just given their point of view.
Again, so my understanding was that if Cal had raised any particular point during his presentation there that caused members' curiosity, concern, or whatever, and they could have taken that opportunity as a result of that to then raise questions with officers. But again, perhaps this is a little bit vague then. I'm not sure if, I guess it's up to Councillor Corkery and later Councillor Bernard-Jackson if they're prepared to take questions from members on the points that they've raised in their allocated speeches. But if that's, it's up to them if they respond or not. But if that's the way we want to go, members, and you want to ask questions of either Councillor Corkery and later on Councillor Bernard-Jackson, as well as officers, then okay, I suppose we could do so. I say it is a bit vague, so I understand, but that was my initial understanding of it. So that takes us then back to Councillor Madden saying he had a question for Councillor Corkery. So I've U-turned, I guess, on this in regards to what's been said. But again, it's up to Councillor Corkery whether he chooses to respond to Councillor Madden, although there doesn't seem to be any schedule here for once someone's given their presentation to then sit back and answer questions. But I guess we can just include it as part of that particular point 2. So going back to Councillor Madden then, Councillor Madden, you can ask your question, but I would say it's up to Councillor Corkery whether he chooses to respond to it or not. He's not obliged to. And then once you've had your question there, then we'll go to Councillor Bosher and anybody else that wishes to raise a hand. So back to Councillor Madden, the question that you wanted to ask to Councillor Corkery, or questions rather.
Chair, I'd rather know what the correct procedure is, because we're, you know, if we're not supposed to ask questions of the lead member at this stage or at any stage, then we shouldn't do it at all, and we shouldn't then be allowed to ask questions. That's the interpretation. But if you actually read 2 in the call-in procedures, it says presentation of the call-in by the lead call-in member, followed by questions, scrutiny management panel members. There is no mention there of officers. So I don't know if Peter, if people want to accept that, that's fine, and so will I. But I think the future instruction should be followed by questions from scrutiny panel members to officers only.
I think it's, to be honest with you, Leah, I think it's my fault in the sense I've always assumed that you should hear from a witness before you cross-examine them. So it's my fault. I think reading the call-in procedure for the meeting correctly, there's no reason why the questions can't be addressed to the lead member as per the little bit of paper I'm looking at now. And it's my mistake for misleading you all. I had assumed you wanted to put the questions to the witness, essentially the proponent of the report first, and then ask the member. So it's my mistake. So carry on the basis that you can ask members. So members can ask the lead call-in member the questions first, then seek clarification from any officers if necessary. I got it round the wrong way, so apologies to all concerned. Does that make sense?
Well, that's your advice to us now, Peter. I think it's up to the panel whether or not we accept that advice. So members,
Logically, it's all.
Okay. And my apologies for the sort of confusion and grey area over this. I think that now clarifies it, hopefully. So, unless there's any disagreement to that, and again, I'd like to just shout out if you've got any disagreement with that, I propose that we will then now take questions, be they either to Councillor Corkery as lead call-in member or to officers in regards to any points that he made during his presentation. I hope that's clear enough. So can I go back, hopefully for the final time, to Councillor Madden? Councillor Madden, you just heard clarification there from our legal advisor. Would you like to ask the questions that you were going to raise, because this is the opportunity to do so?
I've already done so.
Did you? Well, I missed that. What questions did you have to Councillor Corkery?
Councillor Corkery will know.
Oh, okay.
Would you like me to answer, Chair?
Yes, answer now.
Okay. On the first, I mean, there was one definite question around consultation. Councillor Madden started by talking about the impact assessment, and just to kind of reiterate the point we are really making is that we believe the impact assessment related to a different decision, a decision on whether to implement a clean air zone or not, when in fact the decision being considered was whether to amend the boundaries of the planned clean air zone or not. And it seems clear that an impact assessment for changing the boundaries has not been completed and presented to councillors. On the point around the importance of consultation, I would absolutely agree with Councillor Madden. Consultation is incredibly important in matters such as this. I think there was an in-depth and high-quality consultation conducted, and in fact that consultation found that 77% of respondents supported the previously existing boundaries, or in fact wished for it to be the size of the zone to be increased. So on that basis, I think there's a really strong argument from the point of consultation, listening to local residents and kind of democratic accountability, that that's a decision that should have been pursued.
Okay, thank you. Next I have Councillor Bosher.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair, if you can. Perhaps to Councillor Corkery, he's made two comments that I'd just be interested in just expanding on a little bit. He talked in terms that political considerations need to come into these decisions. Wouldn't he accept, though, that it is the decision of the decision maker, shall we say, as to whether they accept or reject the results of a consultation? I mean, arguably, it's not a good place to actually be, but whether they choose to accept or reject the results of a consultation isn't in fact an incorrect or a decision taken on inaccurate information. That's one question.
Okay, I mean, do you want to let us know the second question, and you can reply
Yeah,
to that?
the second one is, I'd be interested to know where he's getting the sort of deprivation according to class from as well. I can't see where that features in inaccurate or inadequate information. I also have a couple of questions for officers, but do you want to deal with those first, or do you want me to ask all four of my questions now?
No, it'd be sensible if you've got just those two for Councillor Corkery. You can come back and do those, and then you can ask your questions to the officers. So Councillor Corkery, that's two questions for you for Councillor Bosher. So would you like to respond to those?
Yep, happy to do so. Do I believe that consultations are mandatory and that the administration should necessarily be mandated to follow the outcome of those consultations? No, that is clearly not the case. But is there a very strong ethical and political case for them doing so? Yes, absolutely. In fact, the reasons that we've submitted today do not feature any reference to consultation, for the reason that we're not suggesting that they are kind of inaccurate or misleading information. Clearly, my comments on that were in response to Councillor Madden's question. On the second point around the the implications of social class and any evidential basis for that, I think there's a number of different sources we can look at, most notably the indices of multiple deprivation, which make clear that Charles Dickens is by far the most deprived ward in the city, one of the most deprived wards in the country, and those types of deprivation include health deprivation. So, for example, it's known that there's a 10-year life expectancy difference between people that live in Charles Dickens and people that live in Greater Farthington. Respiratory illnesses within Charles Dickens ward are the highest in the city. Respiratory illnesses are clearly linked to levels of air pollution, as mentioned in my original statement. And there's a question, of course, of whether they're caused by air pollution or just worsened, but clearly there is at least some kind of link between those.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Corkery. Councillor Beauchamp, you have 2 questions for officers. Would you like to present those now?
Yes, if I can. I don't know which officers are going to answer these, but I'm sure somebody will stick their hand up. The implementation of a clean air zone is not a Portsmouth making, it's a government directive, so therefore we have to put the clean air zone in. Is it the government that determines the size of the clean air zone with the funding, or do Portsmouth City Council and the administration by default have the ability to amend the size of the clean air zone, whether that be to reduce the size or increase the size of it?
Okay, thank you. Which officer wants to come back on that? Pam, is that for you?
I was going to leave it for Haley, if that's okay.
Okay. Haley, can you respond?
Yeah, of course, that's fine. Yeah, so the size of the clean air zone, we've already established kind of small area zone last year, shows that it works. And then it's kind of based on our own modelling to show what works, what achieves compliance in the shortest possible time. So that's the basis of it. And then within the Transport Act 2000, there's a requirement for us to consult on certain things, and one of those things is the size of the boundary.
Okay, so the City Council can revise the boundary. So
yeah, but it has to be based on modelling to show that compliance is achieved.
So the modelling that we did, whether we politically agree with it or not, showed that we could actually take out Kingston Road and Fratton Road. I noticed in the body of the report it talks in terms that other air quality issues would need to be addressed in those areas if it was to be taken out of the clean air zone. We did the modelling in the first place to take that out. Are mitigations in place in the fact that these 2 roads have been taken out? If the report alludes to it, or is this still work in progress?
Yeah, it's still work in progress. So we're currently undertaking an audit of the traffic signals and pedestrian crossings along that corridor. And we're also doing some work of what we can do with greening along there as well. I would note that the point about it being an air quality management area needing to undertake other work, that's a slightly different legal requirement. So air quality management areas, they're under different legislation. So they're not the same issue as such that's being considered through the clean air zone and the local air quality plan.
Okay, I've got another question, if I may, Chairman, at the moment. In the report that went to Cabinet, there's always this little bit on the bottom that talks in terms of other reports that it makes reference to. At this moment in time, I'm just trying to go through. And it basically says that there's a background list of documents. Following documents disclose facts or matters which have been relied upon to a material extent by the author in preparation of this report. That means, in fact, that these other reports have been taken into consideration when producing the report that you have produced for the benefit of the Cabinet to consider. So you have, in fact, if I'm looking at this, considered the 2019 Air Quality Annual Status Report, which includes Bratton Road and Kingston Road in that report, Clean Air Zone Framework, Environment Act, and the local air quality plan. So at least 3 of those will have included these 2 roads, the air quality issues, the numbers, etc. in them, which would have formed part of the report that went to Cabinet to consider.
Yes, that's right, yeah.
So, okay, thank you.
Okay, Simon, is that your questions?
Yes, for the moment, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I next have Councillor Corkery himself to speak, to ask questions, sorry, then Councillor Peter Harris, and then Councillor Fuller. So, Councillor Corkery.
I haven't got a question for myself, Chair. My hand was from earlier trying to answer the questions. Apologies.
Oh, okay. In that case, we move on to Scott Peter Harris.
Thank you, Chair. It's more on Cal. I don't know if you can help me out. You cited some reports earlier, some additional information. Can you just go over with me where you've got those sources from?
You're probably going to have to specify which information you're talking about.
It was more than, it was relating back to Simon's question regarding the deprivation stats and so on and so on. So if you can just tell me where that information has come from and how you're basing that on the calling, because my impression is at this stage you're not supposed to be putting new information on the table. It's supposed to be down to what is actually in the Cabinet report at the time. So the statement that you made earlier would probably be non-admissible to us as a panel to take it forward. That's what I'm getting at. So I'm very keen to see where you've got that information from. Because 1, it would not stand up in the scrutiny of what we're trying to do. And 2, we wouldn't be able to take it forward if we wanted to anyway. So I think you just need to clarify that as a panel. We need to be knowing that we're making the correct decision from a process perspective. I hope that helps.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, this all relates to, I think, one sentence within my introduction where I made reference to this being an issue of class and environmental justice. I'm happy to accept that is an opinion. It's an opinion based on evidence, but it's not material to the substance of the argument that we're making today. So if members wish to disregard that for the purposes of your consideration, then feel free to do so. But I don't think that then has any further bearing on the substance of the argument.
Yeah, no, thanks, okay. It's just that as a panel, we can only make decision based on the report that was based at Cabinet. So I think any more information such as that, I know you're ad-libbing and you're probably throwing things in, which is your political will to do so. I think it'd be clever for us not to have that sort of thing on the table so we can make a clear decision. Sorry, Chair, if I'm taking your thunder on that, but I'm always under the impression that we're not allowed to introduce new information or new figures from random sources during these proceedings.
No, thank you, Scott Peter Harris. So, Councillor Peter Harris. Peter Bolf, can I just ask you to come in on that? I think Councillor Peter Harris has made a very valid point there. Can you just clarify to us your advice as our legal advisor?
My advice would be not to expand the area of consideration beyond the original documentation and report. So I think Councillor Peter Harris has got a valid comment to make about the concession given to him from Councillor Corkery.
Okay, thank you very much, Peter. Scott, have you got anything else you want to ask, or is it okay?
Move on, let's hear Gerald.
It's not Gerald, unfortunately, yet. It's Councillor Fuller next. Councillor Fuller?
The next best thing, Councillor Scott, Peter Harris. There we are. My question is to Councillor Carl Corkery. Can you just tell me, we're here about incorrect information. Can you just summarise very quickly what incorrect information do you feel is wrong?
Yeah, happy to do so. I will probably just read out from the statement I made at the beginning of this meeting, which is also the statement that's been circulated with the meeting papers. So with regards to information based on inaccurate or incorrect information, we believe there are 2 points which are pertinent for your consideration. The first is that the integrated impact assessment provided did not relate to the decision being taken. The assessment seemed to attempt to address the question of whether clean air zones should be implemented or not. However, the actual decision was being taken was whether to amend the previously agreed boundaries of the proposed clean air zone. This meant that the impact assessment focused primarily on the positive benefits of introducing the clean air zone and did not address any potential negative impacts reducing the size of the zone. This is notably significant in relation to Fratton Road, where there was a concentration of businesses worked in and frequented by ethnic minorities. There was growing evidence of linkages between risk of serious illness from COVID-19, air pollution, and disproportionate impacts on minority communities. This is an important topic that should have been addressed as part of the Equality Impact Assessment. Second, the Cabinet members repeatedly noted the decision the boundary being taken was out of their hands, when in reality the outcome from the decision-making meeting is to ask government to remove the Kingston Road and Fratton Road from the zones. This implies that it was in their hands and there was some discretion in terms of the decision being made.
Thank you very much for that clarification. I've got it now. Thank you.
Okay, members, I've got nobody else that wishes to ask questions at this point, as far as I can see. If I've missed anybody, then shout out. Nope, clearly I haven't. So we then move on now. This is to the response from the lead cabinet member, i.e. Councillor Vernon Jackson. You have up to 6 minutes now to give your address to the panel. Councillor Vernon Jackson.
Thank you. And first of all, my apologies if you hear our 26-year-old cat meowing. She is 26 years old and therefore has the run of the house and is in charge of us. I think the first thing to do is to say that probably no report we ever get to Cabinet or anywhere else is perfect or covers everything. It's just not possible. But I thought this was a really good report that came to us. It's 114 pages in length, so a lot of detail within it. So I'm just going to address some of the issues that have been raised. I think the first bit, which we all need to be aware of, is that air pollution is an incredibly important issue. That none of us should take it lightly, and I'm pleased that this council is doing so. Other Labour councils like Bristol and Sheffield have decided to use the issue of the pandemic to try to delay their clean air zones, and we've decided not to. And we've got to address this issue, which we will do. So we're going to work hard at this. This call-in is about the exact boundary of what should or should not be in the clean air zone. And in reality, it's about whether Fratton Road and Kingston Crescent should be in or out. So these are details about what's on the edge of the issue. My understanding is that the government criteria is that we have to produce a plan that addresses the points where their modelling says air pollution exceeds what they say is all right. And there are 2 points here. One is Alfred Road down by Unicorn Gate, and one is Church Street, near All Saints Church. And we have to produce a plan that reduces the air pollution in those 2 points down to an acceptable level in the shortest possible time. But doing so, we have to use the smallest area possible, because the government will. This is done by government funding. It's costing 25 million quid to do. And I know the Labour Party has pushed for the whole of the island to be part of the clean air zone, but we've been told very, very clearly that's not on by the government. So I think this is about the edge of what should or the edge of the clean air zone only. So I think we need to have a think about some of those things. So I think one of the things we did talk about there was the businesses, particularly on Fratton Road. And I think it's important that the council does take account of what happens to businesses. Fratton Road, as we all know, is very, very marginal shopping. There are an awful lot of empty shops on Fratton Road, and doing things that put them at a disadvantage to others is problematic. We also know that a very large number of the shopkeepers and businesses down there are owned and run by members of the ethnic minority in the cities, and I think we've got to be careful not to discriminate against them. So an issue that's come up since the meeting, I think is actually an interesting and useful thing to say, is that with the Fratton Road in the scheme, all 3 railway stations on the island would be in a clean air zone, and therefore there's an argument that it would discourage people using public transport, trains, and taxis, and encourage people to use cars further. We don't think clean air zone is the best thing in the world. It's a very blunt instrument. We've asked the government to look at lots of other things, which would cost significantly less than 25 billion quid that they're wanting to spend on this clean air zone. But they've said no to all of them. We've asked them about scrappage scheme to get older cars off the road and replaced with newer, less polluting cars. We've asked them about investments into transferring the taxi and private hire fleet to being electric, and they've said no. We've asked them about investment to give people bus tokens or bus passes to reduce the cost of bus travel, to get a modal shift out of cars and into buses, but they've said no. So there are lots of other ways in which air pollution could have been addressed, but the government have said no to all of those, and they've just said we have to go down this route. So one of the things that's been very, very clear is that on these 2 points in the city, at Church Street and at Alfred Road, we are exceeding government targets. We've been told we have to bring something in to bring that down. The proposal is to bring this in the summer of 2021, and if nothing was done, the modelling says that those 2 points would hit the government targets in 2023. But if we bring in the clean air zone, we'll hit it in 2022. But the clean air zone only stays in as long as you're exceeding your targets. And if you can show that you've met them and they're going to keep meeting them, then the clean air zone goes. So we're talking about something that's going to go in for 1 or 2 years, and maybe not that long. I think there are problems, but my understanding is some of this is government control. So, for instance, one of the questions asked in the consultation is something that we could not deliver. It said, do you want a bigger clean air zone? And 39% of people said yes. We weren't able to do that because the government rules say you've got to have the smallest possible area. So I think this is, as with so many things, this is not a black and white issue. This is a series of greys, and there probably is no absolutely right and no absolutely wrong answer. But I think it was a very good report that was brought to us by Hayley and Pam, who I think have put in an enormous amount of work to try to inform us. The Cabinet have not taken a politically cowardly route and said, oh, we'll kick this down the road because of the pandemic and we'll think about that later, as other Labour councils have done. We said we will do this, but we've tried to do it in a way. Thank you. We've tried to do it in a way that meets people's needs with the least inconvenience, but means that we do hit the targets that the government has set for us. So I don't see that there's been any information missing or anything that's been in any way any information that's been wrong in the report or missing from the report, and I think this is a entirely sensible decision.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Vernon Jackson. At the moment, I've got 3 members. I think these are from the last set of questions. Councillor Bosher, Councillor Peter Harris, and Councillor Ashmore. You've got your hands raised still. Unless you wish to raise a question, sorry, Councillor Fuller. Unless you wish to speak on this issue, you can actually put your hands down. Thank you. Right, that was the presentation by Councillor Vernon Jackson. Can I ask if any members got any questions they'd like to put to Councillor Vernon Jackson, or indeed any officers, as a result of what Councillor Vernon Jackson has just said? Right, I've got Councillor Bosher, then Councillor Madden, and then Councillor Hooper. So Councillor Bosher, first of all.
I think the leader would be disappointed if I didn't have some questions to ask him.
Always good to chat, Simon.
I've been back through the original Cabinet live stream, although not live, if you know what I mean, and listened to the debates that were going forward on there. During that, some of the Cabinet members, and I think yourself were one of them, actually said that we did not have the funding to include Fratton Road and Kingston Road in the clean air zone. Is that correct? Or should I be directing that to an officer for a correct reply?
Now, I think we probably could, because it's about having a look large numbers of cameras, because it's not just on the edge of the zone, you've got to have them in the zone as well, because you have to check to see if people are driving around within the zone. Even though cars aren't included and 90% of people going up and down Fratton Road won't be included, I expect probably it wouldn't cost a huge amount more to have those two roads extra, but it would cost a bit more. And we'd have to have a discussion with the DFT about, DEFRA, sorry, about their funding for this. Because they put the funding in and then they take the money from the fines to pay that back off.
If they weren't included in the original funding, which is what I'm sort of drawing from your answer, then why were they part of the consultation document that went out in the first place then? Why have you included something in the consultation document that didn't have the appropriate funding?
Because some of the consultations, I understand, it's very much set down by government. And for instance, as I said, it included a question to which 39% of people said yes, that we're not allowed to do. Now, I prefer not to have consultations where we give people options, something that we can't do.
Well, you actually said about making it bigger, but the original consultation included those two roads. So it was probably fair to say then, as part of the original consultation, that those people that were asking for the zone to be made bigger were working on the premise that Fratton Road and Kingston Road were, and the other areas, let's not forget that there are other areas there, were actually included as part of that consultation. So arguments about should it be made bigger, those people would rightly have been under the assumption that the area was as the area is, and included those ones that you subsequently decided to take out. So it's a bit of a false argument to suggest that the clean air zone started, as far as you were concerned, not including Fratton Road and Kingston. From my perspective, when you actually look at it from that point of view.
No, so it started off being the whole island. So that's where we started from.
Well, in which case, then you had the funding to do the whole island. But I mean, that's where we are where we are.
So we started on that basis, and then work by Hayley and Pam very helpfully meant that we could have a smaller area and still hit the limits that were set by government. And my understanding is that we have to have something which is the smallest possible area to hit exceedance in the earliest possible time.
Just about to ask a little bit about your thinking when it came to the original decision behind it, because we've heard, I'll call them deputations, but obviously Councillor Corkery's was actually an introduction, whereas Councillor Smythe's was a deputation, but they effectively are the same thing with arguing the points. They both cited some of the statistics from the consultation showing that there was a majority in favour in a variety of different areas when it came down to including Fratton Road, Kingston Road and some of the other areas, and in fact looking to make it bigger. Given the fact that that was the consultation, and the consultation being liberal and being democratic showed that you wanted to keep it there, why in fact did you take the decision to go against the consultation then? I'm just trying to understand your thinking. Go against the consultation, actually reduce the size of the area in opposition to the consultation.
Well, so can I refer you to 6.25 in the report? 39% of people said they wanted a larger area, something we could deliver. I'm unclear about why that was in the consultation. I think it's because the government asked us to do it in that way. But that was something that we were unable to deliver completely.
So you've consulted on something that you can't deliver, or you were unable to deliver from day one?
Yes, because the government won't let us do that. Now, I don't know if the government said that we should say that. Hayley is waving vigorously and might be able to help. But the consultation did include a question about being bigger, and we know we're not allowed to. Hayley, would you like to help?
Hang on a second. Hang on a second. Hayley, you've put your hand up. Can you shed some light on that, please?
Yes, of course. So the question about making it larger, I think a lot of members of the public took that as, do we want it to cover the whole island, which obviously before we submitted the outline business case, we already showed that we couldn't really do that because it was more effective to make it smaller. But the issue in this consultation about should it be larger, it was more, should there be a few roads around the edge that we should include that aren't in there that we might have overlooked. So for example, if someone was saying, okay, if you don't include X road, you'll get rerouting. It's that kind of issue that we were consulting on, not should it cover the whole island. And I think it's worth pointing out that in the report, it does show that the response on should it be bigger or smaller does depend on who was responding. So if you look across all respondents, the majority are saying, yes, it should be bigger, but the majority of respondents won't be charged by the cabs. If you just look at the people who will be charged, so taxi drivers and HGV drivers, the majority of them said, no, it's far too big. So I would take that with a pinch of salt, that high level statistic about how many said it should be bigger.
Hayley, thank you for that. Simon, this was originally from your questions. Do you want to come back on that, or have you got any other questions you want to ask? Councillor Bosher?
Simon, you're on mute.
That sounds very much like an answer for the American elections, to be quite honest, and you determine the votes depending on where people actually are and what they're actually doing. Are we seriously saying then that when it comes down to a consultation, that some people's opinions are more important than others on something like this? Because that's what I've just taken from the answer I've just been given.
I take completely the opposite, but you may be a Trumpist.
It's gone quiet. Okay, Simon, do you have any more questions?
That's a no.
I'll take it no. Okay. Next one down is Councillor Madden. Councillor Madden, you're on mute.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I've just unmuted. Could I, sorry, yeah. Gerald, could I ask you the question in relation to this call in this has been called in simply because the decision that you made and the Cabinet made was based on inaccurate or incorrect information. You've given a lot of the detail in the past, but do you actually accept that you could have changed things or something could have been better?
I think inevitably, in all reports, something could have been added to anything every single time. You never get something which has got absolutely everything, because otherwise we'd be having reports of a couple of thousand pages for each decision. I think it was a very good report that it included a huge amount of detail, 114 pages of stuff here, and I think Hayley and Pam did an extremely good job. There might be some details you might want to add to it, but I think the information we had was absolutely enough to be able to make the decision, and that the stuff that we were given was accurate.
Okay, thank you for that. Can I say, I mean, you've said it, but there's an implication in the call-in that, in fact, we were discussing whether or not to have a CAZ or not. We have to have one, full stop. The size of it and the way we go about it is completely different or up for grabs. So we have to do a CAZ, right? The report also says that, and the way I read it, Gerald, is that it's not the end of the issue in the sense there are various bits still to come back. What I call them, the joint monitoring of joint air quality unit have yet to come back to us. That's paragraph 4.6. 4.7.1 talks about a further update in December next month. So as we go along and as more information becomes available, the Cabinet may well tweak things. Is that correct?
Well, yes, and I think that things may happen at different places. I think there is a real worry on the Isle of Wight about what's going to happen to their economy, because all the lorries going through from Gunwolf to Ryde are going to be covered by this, and all the coaches. And I think they're very, very worried about what's going to happen with their economy on the Isle of Wight. So there are going to be a lot of different pressures. I think one of the outcomes of this is it makes Commercial Road less viable as a shopping location, because the government will be putting in a CAZ that puts a cost on deliveries to shops in Commercial Road, but not putting a cost on deliveries to shops to out-of-town centres in Burfield Road or up at Hedge End. And I think that will mean that the high street is more vulnerable and more jobs will be lost because of it. So I think there are lots of different things that will play into it, and different bits of government will have different influences on a final decision.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Vernon Jackson. Councillor Madden, any other questions? No. Okay, Councillor Hooper, you're next. Councillor Hooper? Joe, you're on mute if you wish to speak.
Sorry, I'm back. Right, thank you, Jason. According to Councillor Vernon Jackson, the buzzword from government seems to be no when he asks various questions around other measures to mitigate environmental concerns. So I'd just like a bit more detail on that. Firstly, who asked these questions and when? And secondly, a little more detail on why the government said no, because they've been very keen to look at the clean air issue up in Portsgrove. One of the issues, a minister came down, spent some time with Penny Morgan at one of our disused halts there, and is very keen to get it reopened. So yeah, if Councillor Vernon Jackson or an officer could just answer those two questions, please.
Very happy to. As leader of the council, following cabinet meeting last year, I wrote to the Secretary of State with a whole series of different proposals. And I think it must have been in the spring of 2019 that I wrote. The whole series of suggestions and proposals of things that might happen. And we got a bland and non-committal answer that didn't say anything from the minister, which you'd not be surprised about, because that's what most ministerial answers are. And we've had no positive engagement with DEFRA or DFT about any alternatives since that time, which has been very disappointing. I think we've got to be careful as well with things. I'm interested to see the issue of the halt up at Drayton. My understanding is that that we can build a station, but the train companies have been very clear that they won't stop their trains there because they don't want to add extra stations. And if they do stop them there, they'll want to not stop them somewhere else because it's messing up their timetables, and they won't be able to get enough people onto the trains because they have lots and lots of faults. So we've got to have real practical solutions to some of this stuff. I'm very happy if we can get ministers to change their minds. And Joe, if you can persuade them to change their minds and come up with funding for alternatives, that would be brilliant. And we'll all cheer you from the rafters.
Councillor,
I think Joe is waving to ask something else.
I haven't finished. Hello, can you hear me? Sorry, I'm a bit useless with this. Can you hear me? Right.
Yes.
Sorry. Yes. Are you prepared to share this engagement that you had with the minister? I don't recall ever, because some of the letters you actually send around, don't you?
Yeah, no. So I'm happy to see if we can send that out to members.
Okay. And also, secondly, the whole issue, it just doesn't affect Drayton and Farlington.
Yeah.
You know, I care about everybody in the city, but particularly Councillor Corkery has talked about Charles Dickens being a very deprived ward. So is Portsgrove. We also have massive issues there. In Charles Dickens, we may not have a lot of car ownership, but in Portsgrove, being geographically remote, we certainly do. And the issue is, for me, in reopening this halt, it allows for far better connectivity for my residents, who at the moment do feel a bit disconnected from the city. And also, we need to cut down on car ownership. You know, your administration have focused on that and said that is so important. I and Portsgrove don't have enough space to put all these cars. It's a constant issue. So by getting the whole open, and the government have been very proactive on that, this will be a positive thing for an area specifically like Portsgrove. So yes, very happy. I think it's coming up in full council at some point. Very happy to discuss that with you.
Yeah,
thank you.
Yeah, I think having it halt both at Portsgrove and Drayton Park would be really good, as long as the train companies are prepared to service it, and they're not going to cut other stations in spite to balance things out.
Yes, but tomorrow I believe it's a question in full council, so we will be able to discuss this, because I think there's been some dragging of heels. We're all focused on trying to improve the environment in Portsmouth, of course. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Joe.
Okay, thank you, Joe. Next, I have Councillor Fielding.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of points, Gerald. You mentioned in your statement that it was the Labour group's position to want a island-wide CAZ. Now, as far as I'm aware, that has never been the official position. All we've ever asked for is for it to be ambitious and to be as big as possible. Never having stated it being an island-wide. That's more of a statement than a question. But what I wanted to question was, do you acknowledge that the integrated impact assessment wasn't correct for the report, as pulled up by Councillor Corkery, in that it was the assessment that was there was on the decision of whether to have a clean air zone or not, as opposed to reducing the size of it? And my second question would be, do you acknowledge that by removing Fratton Road, Kingston Road and other surrounding roads, that we're still going to have exceedances in air quality emissions in those areas, which would then mean we would probably have to then have a second clean air zone to cover those areas at a later date?
Doing them in reverse order, George. My understanding is the government are only interested in the two locations, which is triggering the clean air zone, which is at Alfred Road and Church Street, and that air quality around the city is getting better and is scheduled to get better. So that if that is the case, there shouldn't be the need for any other clean air zones because air quality is improving. On what was the first question, George?
The integrated impact assessment.
Oh, yes. Yeah, I see the report was, I suppose we could have taken the view that we were we'd refuse to have a clean air zone. I'm pleased to know that you think that we're responsible enough not to have done that, but that could have been the outcome, but we didn't. So the report was about whether to have the clean air zone and its boundaries, and I think the assessment we had saying that we should have a clean air zone was the right assessment, and that informed the decision that we would go ahead and we would have one. So I think because of the decision at the end meant that everybody was on the same page and saying yes, we should have the clean air zone. We actually concentrated on a small bit of the decision, not on the main decision. And the main decision we had was we're going to have a clean air zone. We're not going to delay like other councils. We're actually going to get on and get it done. And so I think that's appropriate. Going to your first point, George, I think from memory, it was Councillor Smythe's cabinet meeting who said that that Labour group policy was to have one for the whole island. And I've been very grateful to Judith for that clarification.
That's fine, but what I'm not particularly happy with the response given, Gerald, in the sense that you'd already made the decision as to whether to have the clean air zone or not. What the decision that came before cabinet was about reducing the size of it, and the integrated impact assessment does not correlate to that decision. So I understand where Cal Corkery's coming from in terms of his call-in. One other point I'd like to just for out of interest, did you honestly believe you were going to get a positive response from government with your wish list?
It's always good to be hopeful and positive and to ask the government for things, because sometimes they say yes. To be frank, this time getting funding for being able to put in place the stuff to be able to make sure the city doesn't grind to a halt with Brexit has been much, much easier than last time. And we've had a positive response from ministers, and that's been great. So sometimes things change. So we do get positive responses. I'm not going to take an entirely political thing and say we never get a positive response, because that's not true. We do sometimes, and I'm very grateful for that, for when that happens. So the report, the basic report is Clean Air Zone consultation feedback. Now, we could have taken the line, George, that other Labour councils have done, and we could have said, no, we're going to put it on hold for a year. But we chose not to, and we chose to go ahead because clean air is a really important issue and we want to take it seriously.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Byrne-Jackson. Councillor Fieldy, any more questions? No, okay, we then move on to Councillor Benjamin Dowling.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, something I didn't think I needed to say at the start of the meeting, but given the time, I'm saying it now. If we are still in this meeting at 3:55, I'm afraid I will have to depart in order to teach a lesson via Zoom in a Portsmouth school. So I hope we won't still be here at that point, but if we are, my apologies to yourself, Chair, and everyone else.
Get them to dial into this. The kids would love it.
I'm not so sure about that either, but perhaps some would. Anyway,
Poor kids.
So my apologies just on that point, Chair. I think thinking about the purpose of this call-in and the basic grounds of the reasoning for the call-in, I think it would be helpful to better clarify and understand the premise of the decision-making being done. So, we're here talking about inadequate information and incorrect and inaccurate information, and we can go around the houses on some of these details, but I also think some of them could be cleared up in a fairly black and white manner. So I suppose I'm going to give my understanding of the premise, and then perhaps the leader and the relevant officer might be able to give their perspective on it. But my understanding is that decision for a clean air zone had already been made, and I think everyone on this call broadly agrees with that statement. Consultation went out about said clean air zone because A, consultation is a good thing, and B, government says we have to do it, and I think everyone broadly agrees with that too. Consultation feedback comes back in, and so decision needs to be made about the size of the clean air zone, and again I think everyone agrees with that. However, I think the point at which we may have some contention is the premise on which you then make the decision about the size of the clean air zone, because by some of the narrative today there seems to be this assumption that we do consultation and then the only thing we then consider is the consultation results, which I think is not entirely true or fair. I think consultation results have an incredibly important place in decision making, but they're not the entire picture. And my understanding from what we've heard is that government perspective on clean air zones is that you should have the smallest possible zone in order to reach compliance in the shortest possible time. That's my understanding, and clearly if modelling dictates that you're able to get the same compliance with a smaller zone than a bigger zone, then the basic premise of you have to have the smallest zone in this to reach compliance in the smallest amount of time. Therefore, you would go with the smaller zone. At which point, that is the most the modelling, which was very, very clearly laid out in the report, becomes by far the most important part of that decision-making process, because the basic premise is relating to effectively what is a government diktat. At which point, I think some of the other slightly more minor points of this become more irrelevant from my perspective. So I suppose, Leader, is that your understanding of the premise? And perhaps Hayley or Pam or someone can also give their perspective.
Broadly, yes.
Okay, thank you, Gerald. Hayley or Pam? Okay.
And Joe can have a gin and tonic too.
Say again, Gerald, I missed that. What did you say?
Joe's been asking for a gin and tonic by actions, and I think she should share that.
Excuse me, I asked for a glass of Pepsi Max. Thank you. Teetotal this afternoon.
Right, thank you, everybody. That's the end of the questions I can see in regards. Nobody else has indicated. So we now move on. The next 2 points are a further response may be made by the lead call-in member, so that's you, Councillor Corkery. And the point after that is that you may then sum up your case. So it's up to you whether you wish to make a further response. If you do, then you can do so now. If not, we then move on to you summing up your case. Councillor Corkery.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Well, I will take the opportunity to respond to some of the points that have been raised by the leader over the course of that discussion that are new to the meeting. Firstly, I mean, clearly there's an issue here around. Someone's going to come in. Clearly, there's an issue with regards to the basis on which this decision is being made. That's distracting me a bit. So one of the key questions here is whether there was any discretion on behalf of the Cabinet to include Fratton and Kingston Road as was originally planned, or whether, I mean, Councillor Dowling made reference to government diktat, whether the government was dictating that these roads must be removed. And I mean, maybe this is a point where it would be useful for opposite input, but the advice I have taken from them on a number of occasions is that they were quite clear that the inclusion of Fratton Road and Kingston Road and Kingston Crescent had in fact already been approved by government as part of the the outline business case. And
is now exiting.
There was no reason, kind of legal or financial, why the inclusion of those roads and the leader also made some reference to it costing more in order to include Fratton Road and Kingston Road, which I can't see how that would be the case. I can't see how there would have to be more cameras when bearing in mind at the current state, if you exclude Fratton Road and Kingston Road, every single road entry on the west Fratton and Kingston Road is now going to have a camera on, which is quite a significant amount. But I mean, that's slightly a moot point, but I can't see there's going to be any big cost differences. And certainly there aren't going to be any big cost differences to the council because either eventuality would be funded by central government in its totality. I think the leader made an interesting point when he talks about the impact on businesses, and people will know this is one of the key points that's made within our call-in reasons. And actually, although the economic case was referred to verbally by Cabinet members as part of the decision-making process, there was no evidence to support that. There was no evidence in the report. There was no evidence provided with regards to what the economic case would be. The leader went on to talk about the economic impact on businesses owned by people from ethnic minority backgrounds along Fratton Road, which I think is a really important and interesting point. And in fact, that is exactly the kind of point that equalities impact assessments are designed to touch on. So they should talk about any economic impact on those groups. It should also talk about any public health impact on those groups. However, as has been noted, the equalities impact assessment that was part of the integrated impact assessment did not do that. And in fact, what that report related to, that assessment, was a previous decision, which again, as Councillor Dowling noted, a decision had already been made to have a clean air zone. The decision that was up for discussion at the Cabinet meeting was the boundaries of that clean air zone. And if we refer back to the report that was being considered, it actually has a section within it that says this is the purpose of the report, section 1. It says this report provides an overview of the results of the recent public consultation that sought views on the operation of the charging clean air zone in Portsmouth. In particular, this report discusses the results relating to changes in the clean air zone boundary. So clearly the report makes clear What is being considered is whether to amend the boundaries or not whether to have a clean air zone or not. So the impact assessment should relate to what the decision is discussing, and clearly it does not. There's been some discussion, the leader has made reference to a number of times about the Cabinet could have made a decision to put the whole clean air zone on hold, and he used this as an opportunity to try and score some party political points about what other councils are doing. I can't see A, how that's relevant, or B, what any justification would have been for putting it on hold. There was a strong public support for the clean air zone, as evidenced by the consultation results. So it seems to be a bit of a misnomer, probably just an opportunity for the leader to try and score some political points, which isn't particularly helpful to the discussion we're having. The leader has accepted that the decision probably was based on incomplete information, which I think is a quite startling admission, given that is the exact thing that is up for discussion here today. If we accept the leader's judgment on this, then as far as I can see, the Scrutiny Management must refer the decision back to the Cabinet in order for the whole the information to be considered. So, I mean, just in conclusion, in response to what the leader has said, he's given a very spirited general defence of the decision that was being taken. But what he has failed to do is address the specific point raised within the reasons for this calling request. He's made the general argument for the clean air zone and for changing the boundaries, but what he hasn't done, definitely not in any particular detail, is address the points that we've made in the calling request with regards to incomplete, inaccurate and inadequate information. So that is my response to the leader's submission, Chair. Would you now like me to go on and summarise the case?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Corkery. There are no opportunities for members to ask questions in respect to your response. So, yes, if you can now move on to summing up your case. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So, in conclusion, I think the discussion we've had today, over the course of it, we've identified a number of ways in which the decision was either based on inaccurate or inadequate information. I think really the crux of the matter here is the equalities impact assessment features as part of the integrated impact assessment. Now, if it is accepted, as we contend, that impact assessment does not relate directly to the decision being made, i.e. whether to vary the boundaries or not, then clearly that is a very significant omission on behalf of the Cabinet in order for them to consider the correct information. There are obviously very significant legal implications of this. And as noted previously, the leader has touched on the importance of understanding the specific impacts on minority communities in the Fratton Road area of the decision that was being made. However, that impact has not been formally assessed or presented in any evidence. I think that we've also presented a series of other reasons and ways in which quite crucial information has not been considered by the Cabinet. Or certainly no evidence has been provided for statements that have been made, for example, with regards to the economic impact of including Fratton Road or Kingston Road. That was stated as a reason by several Cabinet members to that and has also been repeated today. However, I can't see that any evidence has actually been provided for that. Therefore, it must be considered inadequate information in that it is not supported by any evidential basis. So, in conclusion, I would ask that the Scrutiny Management Panel consider the arguments we put forward today. We believe there is a compelling case that inaccurate and inadequate information has been considered as part of this decision, and therefore the decision is only right and proper to be referred back to the Cabinet for reconsideration on the basis of the full information available to them. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Corkery. We now move on to the lead Cabinet member, summing up your case. So, Councillor Bernard-Jackson, over to you.
Thanks. It's an interesting discussion. I think we've had a useful discussion as well today, as well as the Cabinet. It seems to me that we always have to rely on reports which are written by officers. I think this was a good report and included all the information that we needed to be able to make a decision. But no report, nothing is ever 100% full with everything. every single report coming to the council could be added to in some way or another. And we have to make the decision about whether we've got enough information and it's accurate enough to be able to make a decision. Otherwise, the whole council would grind to a halt. I think there is because of the other places in the country that have made decisions to delay bringing in the CAZ because of the pandemic, I think that's something that has happened and is right for us to think about. And it would have been a possibility at that meeting for the Cabinet to make that decision. We didn't, and I think it was the right thing to do not to make that decision and not to follow those other councils. So I think we had the right information. I think we had enough information, and that the decision we came to was a logical conclusion of the information presented. And I'd like to put on record my thanks to Pam and Hayley and all the team who I think have worked in an incredibly professional way in putting this together. And Chair, I think my involvement with this now finishes. Is that correct?
Yes, obviously you're quite welcome to stay for the rest of the debate, but
I am 36 minutes late for another meeting.
Okay, well I guess we'll say goodbye to you then. Thank you for your contributions today.
If you do need me again, somebody can text me and I can join you again. But I think that is the formal part of my involvement finished.
Correct. Okay, well thank you for Councillor Byrne-Jackson. Enjoy the rest of your day. For those that are remaining members, we now move on to the final two parts of this. Item 7, so part 7 is a general debate amongst scrutiny management panel members, followed by a decision. So what I'll ask now, if anybody wishes to speak in the debate, please raise your hand. If not, well, I imagine there will be some contribution. If not, we'll then move on to a formal vote on whether there's any action taken or whether there isn't. So does anybody wish to speak in general debate? Right, I have a plethora of hands raised. I'll go through them as I've seen them. First of all, Councillor Peter Harris.
Thank you, Chair. It's not so much debate. I think we have discussed this probably 45 to an hour longer than we probably needed to, in my opinion. We've got the information at hand from Councillor Byrne-Jackson and from Councillor Corkery. I'm of the opinion that I don't feel that there is a need to send this back to Cabinet. I think that the Cabinet member has demonstrated the information quite well. I think Councillor Corkery has presented an argument which is more of a political argument than an actual argument based on the information at hand. The report is the report fundamentally. I mean, that can't be changed, you know. And the information on the report is quite explicit in what it says. It's down to the Cabinet to decide whether they want to implement it or the recommendations, or whether they want to do their own their own implementation of what they feel is correct. That is a Cabinet decision. I don't always agree with the Cabinet on a lot of things, but I respect the fact that they have that ability to do so. So I'm of the opinion that I'm going to put forward now that we do not send this back to Cabinet, and we proceed on the basis that there is nothing to follow.
Thank you, Councillor Peter Harris. We'll obviously get the opportunity to either endorse that decision or not after everybody else has made their contributions. Can I move on now to Councillor Dowling? Just to make it clear, the speakers so far, those requesting to speak, Councillor Dowling, followed by Councillor Madden, Councillor Bosher and Councillor Fielding. If I've missed anybody, then indicate to me, but I'll move on now to Councillor Dowling.
Thank you, Chair. I think I'd just like to comment on kind of the timescales and the order in which some of this has happened. And Councillor Corkery put quite a lot of emphasis on the fact that government had approved the clean air zone in the outline business case, and therefore it was up to PCC to make further decisions. And I think what we're forgetting is that government is also equally, in the same way, if council makes a decision, they're able to change it or reverse it. So are government, and government, gave funding based on information at that moment in time. In between that point in time and the meeting we're currently discussing, there had been considerably more modelling, considerably more information. The public consultation had happened, and so again, government approved the CAZ, or preliminarily approved the CAZ based on the information that was available at that point in time. But government is not blind to the reason the CAZ, one of the core reasons the CAZ was reduced in size was because of the further modelling that had been done, and that's people refer to that throughout the meeting, and I've gone back and watched it as well, and therefore if we're able to make those deductions and see that evidence, so is government, and so simply because government made commitment to the CAZ in the first instance doesn't mean that they wouldn't then come back and enforce their perspective should they need to at some future point in time. So I think putting quite a lot of heavy focus on the fact that government had said XYZ at the start of the CAZ process doesn't necessarily mean they weren't able to then have further input, make decisions, etc., etc. So I think there's just a comment there about timescales, and again that comes back to this idea of what is the premise of the decision making, and I think in this scenario government input is quite a significant part of that decision making premise, and on that basis the information that was in the report, particularly I think the modelling here is by far the most important information due to the premise given by government. That's not to discount all the other inputs, including the consultation results, but I think we have to consider the overall legal framework in which some of these decisions are being made. Lots of council decisions are very much at the discretion of Portsmouth City Council or that cabinet member or the cabinet as a whole, but this is very much a process which has a lot of legal frameworks that it sits within. We're working to ministerial directives, we're not working to the wishes 100% of Portsmouth City Council, and I think that's really relevant here. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Dan. Sorry, can I move on now to Councillor Madden?
Thank you, Chair. Can I say that, it's quite clear that everybody who's spoken today wants to see a clean air zone in Portsmouth. It's the size of it that people have been talking about, and whether or not all the information that should have been available was available on that. We always work and always have worked with central government, whatever the colour of the government itself. And we need to, because it's everybody, we disagree on some issues, are working in the best interests of the people of the country, and certainly of the people of Portsmouth that we are. Now, I think it's and it's not a brave thing to do, it's the right thing to do, that we've gone ahead and not suspended doing the CAS or whatever you want to call it because of the coronavirus. And I think that's right. But I also say, as Gerald agreed, it's not the end of the world, this report. I mean, there are there's 4.1 and there's 7.2 in there, which says that further reports will be available at some time in the near future. Am I convinced that this is based on inaccurate, or the decision was based on inaccurate or incorrect information? I am not. I haven't been persuaded by the arguments against it. So I'll second Councillor Peter Harris' proposal that we take no action.
Right, thank you, Councillor Madden. Sorry, apologies for the cat. Councillor Bosher, you're next.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I have to say that I am delighted in so much that both Labour and the Liberal Democrats seem to be wholeheartedly supporting a Conservative governmental decision in this particular matter. But hey ho, I'm sure that's not going to last forever. I'm sort of with Councillor Madden to a certain degree on this, and the fact that if you look at the the impact assessment, it does talk in terms of the fact that it's going to be developed further as the business case moves forward, which infers it's going to be coming back for yet another decision. And actually, when you look at the recommendations in the Cabinet report, there is 2.6, which delegates authority to the Cabinet member for traffic and transportation, so for Councillor Stagg, and environment and climate change to approve minor changes to the CAS boundary that may arise as a result of the detailed site surveys, which are yet to be undertaken, which effectively leaves the door open to the Labour Party that if they feel that a bad decision has been taken, back in. But I would actually come back to what Councillor Corkery actually said in his deputation to Cabinet back in October when this was considered. And he actually said he called it bad consultation, which surprises me, seeing as both himself and Councillor Smythe have hung a lot of their deputations based on the consultation itself. So on the one hand, he's criticising it, on the other hand, he's relying on it. And he finished off his deputation by saying it's a bad decision. So he's actually criticising the decision politically, which is all I've really seen in this scrutiny management. And the fact that the Labour Party and the PPP disagree with the decision that's been taken, rather than the mechanisms that got those recommendations on the order paper in the first place. I mean, you could argue that the fact that the Lib Dem cabinet have effectively ignored a consultation, that's a matter for their collective conscience. But to actually argue that the decision is a bad one doesn't demonstrate to me that it is based on inaccurate or inadequate information in any shape or form. And I am with Councillor Pater Harris and Councillor Madden, where I haven't seen anything that suggests that this should go back to Cabinet to be reconsidered.
Thank you, Simon. I've one final speaker as it stands, Councillor Fielding.
Thank you, Chair. I think I'm going to be the outrider in this debate, in that I believe that the documentation put before the Cabinet to make the decision was inaccurate, in the sense that the integrated impact assessment does not relate to the decision that's being made. Yes, they are living documents and they develop across time. However, if you're going to make a decision that's going to impact a considerable amount of population in the Fratton Road and Kingston Road area, surely you're going to have to consider that as part of the impact assessment from equality standards. So, yeah, I believe it is something that has to be called back to the Cabinet.
Thank you, Councillor Fielding. Now, no one else has indicated they wish to speak. So, we have a proposal from Councillor Pater Harris, seconded by Councillor Leo Madden, that this matter is not referred back to Cabinet and no further action be taken. Can I ask each of you individually whether you support or are opposed to that particular proposal? So I'll go through each of you individually. Can I, in no particular order so I can see you on my screen. Councillor Bosher, are you either for or against that?
I support the recommendation in the name of Councillor Pater Harris.
Thank you. Councillor Dowling.
Yes, I'm for the recommendation from Councillor Pater Harris.
Okay, Councillor Fielding.
I'm against the recommendation from Councillor Pater Harris.
Thank you. Councillor Fuller.
Full support from Councillor Peter Harris.
Thank you. Councillor Hooper.
Full support for Councillor Pater Harris's position.
Okay, Councillor Madden.
Yes, haven't seconded. I fully support.
I thought you would, but I have to ask. Yeah. Councillor Symes.
Yes, I support Pater Harris.
Okay, well that's a clear. I guess I ought to cast my own vote as well. So again, I support that proposal. So that is clearly carried. So the decision of this panel is that no further action be taken, in which case that concludes this particular item. And to clarify to everybody, this will now not be referred back to Cabinet. Okay, there is one final item on the agenda, which is an update information on the report of the themed scrutiny panel. Can I ask Natasha Edmonds, Corporate Services Director, to introduce the report, which members is for information only. After that's been introduced, if you have any comments or questions, then we'll take those then. So, Natasha, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm hoping that everybody has read the report. This is, as you say, an update on the status of the various scrutinies panel work that's been undertaken. So it covers the Housing and Social Care panel, Economic Development, Culture and Leisure, Education, Children and Young People, and transport, environment and community safety. So the report outlined the status of progress against each of those different areas of scrutiny review. The exception being the housing and social care review, because there's been a development since the report was written and published. This was a review of residents' experience in decant from Horatia House and Leamington House. And a meeting has now been scheduled to sign off the review on the 11th of November, with those recommendations from that then going on to Cabinet. For the remaining reviews, the work has started but was severely impacted by the response to the pandemic. A number of all of the reviews involve quite considerable consultation, engagement and physical visits to gather evidence as part of those reviews. And because of COVID restrictions, a lot of that work has not been possible to be undertaken. So it's unlikely that if the current restrictions remain in place for any considerable amount of time, that it's not going to be possible for those reviews to be concluded this municipal year. So I will pause there and see if anybody has any questions.
Okay, members, do you have any questions? Again, as normal, indicate by raising your hand. Councillor Madden. Councillor Madden, you're on mute.
Thank you very much for that. It's no surprise to me because having read the report, it's fairly a lot of inactivity, I'm afraid. I sit in the Housing and Scrutiny panel. You're absolutely right. That will sit on Wednesday to sign off a report, which was completed, I think, well before the COVID, the first lockdown. Well, my concern is that we have panels here, and I know visits had to be made, and I know people are saying there's a lot of officer time involved. I just wonder sometimes about the level of the officer time and whether we need as senior as officers as actually do it. But we have, you know, the City Council in May decided these panels, they decided the composition of the panels. And since then, or before then, of course, we started the Microsoft Teams and Zoom meetings. I just want to know if there are any of these panels, if they can't complete these reviews, could actually start some other reviews and talk about them if they can't actually do any visits. And if there are any in hand to do that. I think, though, I'll find out Wednesday, I think, but I think Health and Social Care had other ones in reserve or could continue once this one was signed off. So I'm just wondering if it is the intention for panels not to meet in this municipal year, because that's the impression of one of them certainly, or whether they tended to meet and maybe talk through these without having to visit members of the public or institutions, whatever, and then or decide on a different topic.
Thank you, Councillor Madden. Before I ask Natasha to come back on that, I've got one other speaker only, which is Councillor Bosher. Oh, sorry, as soon as I say that, it changes. So what I'll do is, in fact, actually, no, I'll change my mind as there's now an indication of other speakers. Natasha, could you come back in regards to what Councillor Madden has just said there?
Thank you. Yes, of course I can. Yes, I think that the reviews as currently scoped would be difficult to take forward, but there is nothing to stop each of the panels from convening to rescope the reviews as they currently stand, or to determine to undertake reviews on different topics and do those in a way that could be done in a COVID safe way.
Thank you very much. You happy with that, Councillor Madden? I want to say happy. You satisfied?
Yeah, no, that's fine. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Bosher, you're next, then Councillor Dowling.
Thank you very much, Chairman. As people might know, I'm Chairman of the Tax Committee, and I've sort of read the comments that have come from the Director of Regeneration with regards to the Tax Committee. And I did have an email exchange with him. This is all about to do with the democratic process as much as anything else. The Tax Committee agreed and voted on what they were planning to do. That went to scrutiny management, who agreed and voted that that's what we were going to do. We then determined the timetable and agreed on that. So the whole thing has gone through a committee process, if you like, of voting and approving things at every step of the junction. And that's probably something similar to the other scrutiny committees, I would have thought. But I pointed out to the Director of Regeneration when he came along and said, that's the route. And you have to look at the first two bullet points he's used in mitigation, which is about there's too many consultations going on at the moment, i.e. we don't want to do your consultation, and talk about consultation fatigue, i.e. we still don't want to do your consultation. Now, my argument is it's not down for the Director of Regeneration to make that decision. It's down to the committee to make that decision. And I did point out at the time and said, I think there was a general feeling amongst the text committee that because we were going through a consultation with this and the fact that the COVID pandemic had an impact, that we will probably be in agreement with the points that he was putting forward. But effectively, if you are going to keep this correct, then there has to be, in our instance, a text committee meeting to agree to a postponement that gets reported back to scrutiny management. Now, that hasn't happened. This is a noting report, when in theory, I think it should something that should be voted on and amended with the recommendations that are coming forward, which I know a lot of people might be rolling their eyes if we're going to do it in the right and proper way. But he's made absolutely no reference whatsoever to having any communication with the text committee in this particular instance whatsoever. And the whole thing reads as if it's been a unilateral decision by a senior officer with no input from the members in any shape or form, which begs the question, who's actually running this council? Because I thought it was members last time I looked.
Simon, can I just come in there? I mean, it's a fair point you raised, and the reason this item is on the agenda today is because I had similar concerns to yourself. And I asked some time ago now for an update on what was happening, and the initial response I had that this scrutiny panels were not deemed as business critical, and to that purpose they'd in fact been put on hold. Now, my group in particular had concern over that because that was not a decision that members we'd taken. So I don't disagree with you there at all. Clearly, the problem that we have is that the pandemic has caused considerable problems, and it may well require some of those panels to perhaps change or at least put on hold some of the issues that they were following. But you are quite right, in my opinion, and I think it's probably down to chairs of respective panels to either reconvene if they can do, which as members we've every right to call that, and to see what progress each of the panels wishes, where they're at and basically where they wish to go from now. This may be a bigger issue for us to raise at Cabinet, certainly within my own group, as I've already touched on, and there was concern over it. But you're right, Simon, we are members, we should be running the authority collectively, and what concerns and issues we wish to raise, we should bring forward. So, in my opinion, there's no reasons that none of the panels can stop meeting. They can meet if they wish. Of course, it's down to the chair and members of those panels whether they think there's anything relevant. But I think bringing up today, whilst it is only a noting report, at least puts on record our concerns, and perhaps this needs a bit more.
I think you're probably right, Chairman, because the fact that this is an information-only report means there is absolutely no vote on it whatsoever. Because quite frankly, and I wouldn't want to be a member of the awkward squad, but in this current format, if there was a vote on this, I would be voting against it because the text committee have not met. And the chances are, if the text committee, and I'm second guessing the views of my members, but on my particular committee, but I've got a pretty good steer from them, but the chances are it will probably end up being a 5-minute meeting agreeing to defer it, and then a recommendation report goes back to scrutiny management. Now that might seem a bit of a process and a bit of a palaver, but it's the right and proper end to something that was started by the same principle in the first place. So quite frankly, I can't support this report because it makes no reference to any consultation with members, or certainly my one doesn't. and the fact that it hasn't been done in a democratic way. And to bring this forward as an information item, I think it is a wrong thing to do, to put it politely.
As always, I value your contribution, Simon, and I'm not odds with you over that one. So I think what I'll do as chair of Scrutiny Management Panel is try and progress this a bit further, obviously without stepping on the toes of each of the respective chairs. But unless there's any other disagreement from members, I think we're probably all on the same hymn sheet in regards to this one. So yes, thank you for that, Simon. I had Councillor Dowling down to speak. Have you've now lowered your hand?
Sorry, Chair. I thought you were going to skip over me, and I wasn't fussed enough to make a big deal about it. But
of course, you're down as a speaker, so far away.
So, firstly, Chair, I want to be absolutely clear that I have the utmost respect for our officer corps, and in particular our senior officers who have been dealing with the pandemic. And I just want to make that absolutely clear before I make my next comments. I think my definition of business critical and the definition that has been followed over these past months on the whole is the same, but there are some key points where I believe the perspective of business critical from the community is different from the perspective of business critical for the running of Portsmouth City Council as an entity. And I absolutely respect that those two things are different, but for me, I'm a councillor elected by the community, and so the community perspective is the one that matters most. From my perspective, we are all elected city councillors, and therefore we all have a role, particularly those who gain SRAs through being committee chairs, and by no fault of their own, they at this moment in time on the whole have not met. And I suppose my key thing, well, two things. Firstly, retrospectively, I do think scrutiny matters. I've been doing scrutiny for 5 of the 6 years I've been on Portsmouth City Council. I think it does have its place. Sometimes we do it well, sometimes we don't, but on the whole, scrutiny is an important part of the governance of the council and therefore the governance of the city. And I think I broadly agree with Simon's perspective, which is, yes, it may well be that what is in the report in terms of what we're able to take forward or not able to take forward is kind of the case. However, that needs to be stated by those committees and by us as the Scrutiny Management Panel who oversee that process. And it's quite clunky, and I appreciate that, and I'd be very up for reforming the way scrutiny works if that's something anybody wants to look at, which I suspect it probably isn't. But the key point around the fact that scrutiny should happen, I think, is really important. And if anything, those topics that are were up for debate at pre-COVID, I'm sure they will become relevant again, but they're probably not as urgent as other things we could potentially look at via scrutiny anyway. And I think most panels would come to a fairly quick agreement on that. But the fact that the panels were just halted kind of unilaterally, not unilaterally, that's not fair on officers, but they were automatically muted as not critical to the running of the council, and I understand the reasons for that, but I happen to disagree. Going forward, Chair, I think we need a really clear directive or statement, or even if it's just an email from yourself to scrutiny panel chairs or to democratic services or to whoever in terms of how this moves forward. Because what we don't want to do is we have another scrutiny management panel meeting in 3 months' time, 4 months' time, and a similar report comes forward. We're currently in our second national lockdown. Who knows what will happen going forward? It would be very easy to just let this slide and then have a very similar information report at the next SMP, which I don't think is where any of us want to be. So I just want to be really clear on what is the directive and who from and to moving forward, completely accepting that this is an information report.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Dowling. Thank you for that. And again, as I touched on just now, I think as chair of SMP, then that's something that I need to do in respect to the other panels. I mean, I will happy to seek advice from other councillors and from whatever groups. I think today there's been no real disagreement from what members themselves have said. We seem to be similar in our views. And again, I take your point, Ben, and it's not been easy for officers. Let's make no qualms over that. The pandemic has disrupted so much in life, and obviously the council's affected, and so many other businesses and individuals are. But before, I've only got one last speaker, which is Councillor Madden. So if I can go to him, then I think we'll be in a position. I'll just say a few words at the end, and we should be in a position to wrap up. But Was that your hand raised from before, Councillor Madden?
Yeah, from before. Sorry, I have nothing to add. Thank you.
All right, okay. Well, that's it. There are no other speakers. Just let me check, because this was the last item. Right, nobody else wishes to speak on that. Natasha, I think it would be unfair not to give you the final word, so to speak, on that. As an officer, you've heard what members have said today. You've heard their feelings and such like. Is there anything you'd like to add before we finish?
Thank you. The only thing I would add is that certainly that there hasn't been any officer decisions not to continue and progress these reviews, and the purpose of bringing the report today was to enable all of you as members to make a decision on how you might want to take some of these reviews forward, recognising some of the challenges of how they are currently scoped, and to give you the opportunity to reconvene the scrutiny panels to either de-scope, change the scope, or introduce new other areas for which scrutiny can be undertaken. So very much hearing what you're saying, and this is about giving the opportunity to enable you to carry scrutiny forward.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, members, well, I'll do what I can. I'll keep in touch with any of you. If anyone wants to send any information to me or any requests, then feel free to do so. And as chair of SMP, then I'll take on board what's been said today, and I'll see what I can take forward further. That basically concludes today's meeting. Thank you everyone, both officers, members, and members of the panel, and obviously guest members for attending. I'm sure we'll see each other tomorrow as it's full council, so enjoy the rest of your days despite the rain. And for example, I think the cat's just broken wind, which is rather unfortunate, but on that note, I think I'll leave. So thank you everybody, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you all.
Bye-bye.